We're going to get started with our panel. We have a prestigious panel today. We have Dr. Alicia Hart, the Chief Operating Officer of Alexandria City Public Schools, Dr. Lynette Washington, Chief Operating Officer of Baltimore Public Schools, and Jeffrey Cardwell, the Chief Operating Officer for Norristown Area School District. So thank you guys for joining us. We can start with just some quick introductions so everybody can get to know you. Dr. Hart, do you want to start?
Sure. Good morning. Can everyone hear me? All right. My name is Dr. Alicia Hart. As Dan just introduced, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Alexandria City Public Schools in Alexandria, Virginia. I've been in the facilities industry since 2004, and I've been in the K-12 industry since 2007. Currently, under my purview with Alexandria, I oversee all of our capital development, our maintenance and custodial services, as well as our transportation, school nutrition, and school security services for the division. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My voice is a little raspy. I'm getting over a cold, but I'm Lynette Washington, the Chief Operating Officer for Baltimore City Public Schools. We have an enrollment of about 78,000 students, and I've been with Baltimore City Public Schools since 2012 in different roles. As Chief Operating Officer, we oversee everything from facilities, transportation, our sustainability team, real estate. So those are just a couple of areas that we oversee.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Cardwell, Chief Operating Officer of Norristown Area School District in Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. As my colleagues, similar responsibilities. I'm responsible for the facilities department, which is made up of maintenance, custodial services, grounds, capital, real estate, transportation, and security. I've been in school operation, I should say, since 2009. Started out in the Philadelphia School District. Thank you.
When we had started with this panel and coming up with questions, we thought we were going to start with a nice light question to get everybody started. But what is your current situation concerning your district's capital improvement plan right now? Alicia, do you want to start?
Sure. So our capital improvement plan, we do a 10-year plan in Alexandria. We've been pretty grateful to receive the funding over the last few years to be able to move our capital program along. I would say in the last 5 years, we've built a new elementary school, a new high school campus. We are currently getting ready to start construction on our next elementary school. And we have our last elementary school in the CIP in about 4 or 5 years. The out years are definitely looking a bit challenging, not just from a federal perspective, but also from a local perspective. So that's something we are currently in conversations with now with the city of Alexandria. We hope to get the funding that we've requested, and that would enable us to continue our modernization projects in terms of building buildings to add capacity, because our enrollment is growing every year. And if we don't receive that funding, we'll have to make some, some tough decisions, but something that we're used to and we'll be able to move forward with if necessary.
So I will say for Baltimore City, we also do a 10-year plan. But one of the things that is different from Baltimore City is that we have been in the process of securing resources at the state level through our legislative process and through bond funding. So Baltimore City is coming to the tail end of what we call the 10-year plan, where we received $1.3 billion to build and renovate new schools across the city, and that amounted to about 28 schools across the city. It was significant because Baltimore had not built new schools over 10 years because we rely on two funding sources, the state and also the local, and our local was significantly lower. So just a comparison is for Baltimore City in the state of Maryland, a counterpart would be Montgomery County. Montgomery County has about $250 million capital budget. 50 million comes from the state and the other comes from local. For Baltimore City, about 50 million, maybe a little bit, 30 million comes from the state, 19 million comes from local. So you can see the significant disparity. And so during that period of time, Baltimore City for 10 years was not building new schools. They could not afford to. They were actually upgrading systems. And so the legislation came together and said we can do more for Baltimore City, and that is the $1.3 $3 billion initiative that happened for Baltimore City to do construction. We're coming to the tail end of that. At the state level, the legislation did another bond funding for all jurisdictions in the state, and that bond funding gave Baltimore City another $450 million, and we're targeting our high school renovations during this period of time and using some of our other capital dollars to do other renovations for our schools, but because we don't have a significant amount of resources to do towards renovation, a lot of times those projects are phased over 3 years. So you're doing probably 2 schools under our regular capital plan, and then we're doing our historical high schools under our major plan. I would say that one of the challenges that we're dealing with right now is the market conditions. What will be the real cost of our high schools that we have under design? Will the cost per square foot actually go up? Will we have to pause and hold because we don't have additional resources coming in to support the construction of those schools? So we're waiting to see as the market shakes out of what the true cost will be to build those schools.
Well, Norristown's a little bit different than my 2 colleagues here. My newest school is 33 years old. So the Norristown Area School District has been underfunded for several years. A lawsuit was brought about for fair funding adequacy, which favored Norristown Area School District for infusing additional money into our district. So we're taking a good amount of that cash to put towards our capital program. Norristown did not have a 10-year plan for improvement because they didn't have the money for it. So it was more of a reaction type of operation, just fixing items in the building that need to be fixed. As the student population grew, it was cutting classrooms in half the size of the square foot. But as I said, we're moving into a better direction now. I think we're seeing better times coming forward with the additional money that's going to come from the state. We currently just finished a facilities master plan that lays out a 10 to 15-year plan for us actually to spend roughly $300 million in improvements with the addition of to our high school and possibly building a new middle school, tearing down our oldest school that's 110 years old, that is not ADA compliant. So we're on a turnaround to really make something different for the citizens and the students of Norristown Area School District. So one of the challenges, obviously, is as we project out, looking at what's going to happen with federal funding, because that may slow down any of our plans moving forward. With the money that's coming in from the state, we may have to offset those funds to for the shortfall that may come from the state budget. But we were able, over the last 10 years, or 5 years, I should say, put a healthy amount of money into our capital reserve. So we are moving forward with projects. Last night I was Zoom with our board. They just approved for us to start a GISA project, in a sense, where a guarantee energy savings. And we're going to take the findings from there to move that money forward into our capital improvement plan once that study's done and we identify the cash flow that would come from there. We have a capacity issue. We're doing something unique. We're doing prefab additions to the building, much cheaper than your traditional bricks and mortar. So roughly about 16,000 square feet or to 20,000 square foot on 3 buildings. We'll be doing that. Quick turnaround too. That process takes 10 to 15 months from design to install. So that's where we are with our future plans with our capital.
Lynette, you said you're coming out of your 10-year plan. Is the school district working on another 10, 15-year plan to go right into after this?
So no, it's all based off of resources, right? And so we don't foresee the state having another big initiative where there's a significant amount of funding that's given through the state capital program. And so right now our 10-year plan does kind of come to a halt until there's another identification of resources to fund the capital plan.
Okay. And we can start with you. You know, as you look to end and for the rest of you in your current plans, how are you prioritizing the projects that are going to receive funding, and then how close to the plan do those projects always fall at the same place in the plan, or do they get moved up as as maybe emergencies arise?
Yeah, and so I think that we are reprioritizing. So right now, it's based off of capacity. So schools that are severely over capacity, those are the ones that we're focusing on in terms of additions happening at those schools. We're also doing prefab, but like prefab modulars on site for where we have overcapacity that's happening. And then the other thing is we're going back to the systemic prioritization, right? So when you can't build new schools, then you start upgrading the systems. And so we are using our facility maintenance, computerized maintenance system. We have Assets Essential that we use. There used to be School Dude, and they have a capital forecasting component of it. And so we're using that because one of the things that it does is just doesn't layer on the life cycle of the system, but it's also using work order data, so you have a true understanding of the conditions of the system. So right now, since there's no significant funding that's available, we're going back to prioritizing facility systems and using that as capital renewals within our buildings.
Alicia?
Thank you. So similar to what my colleague just mentioned, we are prioritizing our capacity projects. With that, those are the projects that we already have planned within our CIP. We also utilize our facilities condition index process, which we do on a tri-annual basis to make sure that we are prioritizing the buildings that have the worst FCI. That helps us have conversations with our school board, with the superintendent, to really inform them about the condition of our buildings, the path forward with our capital process, and how we need to rearrange funding if possible. Something else that we've been very strategic with is making sure that we have emergency CIP funds built within our CIP budget. That's been very important because systems break down all of the time. Even if you have a very robust preventative maintenance process, we know that if an HVAC system goes down, that can take you out of school for multiple days, just depending on the season that you're in. It can create IAQ issues, so on and so forth. So we really want to make sure that we have some set-aside funding for those emergencies and that we continue to focus on our capacity projects moving forward. Currently, our enrollment is at about 16,500 students. We know that our enrollment is projected to grow, I believe, by about 300 to 400 students just next year, and then over the 10-year plan as well. So again, capacity. We've also had conversations about modulars. We're not quite set on a decision with those yet. I have some strong feelings about moving forward in that direction, but we'll see if that's where we land as it relates to funding and our need to make sure that we can, address the capacity growing within the city.
Jeff?
Like I said, Norristown, we're just getting into the phase of a 10-year plan, so our main issues really are around life safeties. So our facilities master plan has already identified level 1 and level 2 priorities. So life safeties and HVAC equipment and the structure of the building itself to make sure it's sound. And then we're dealing with capacity issues as well. So the goal would be to tackle our life safety issues first and then transition into a ninth grade annex onto our high school, and then address, as I was telling you, through prefab building structures for capacity at our other schools. But also taking this facilities master plan will allow Norristown Area School District 2 to have the long-term goal of reshaping our boundaries, trying to really put adequacy on capacity at schools with student population and not have children traveling across town to a school because their boundary is 2 blocks away and there's a school 2 blocks away. So we're looking at prioritizing, as I said, level 1 life safeties, going into how do we maximize our boundaries with our schools, building a new school, and also taking care of annex, as well as we now also have a new work order system that will allow us to capture our preventive maintenance and repairs to equipment and buildings and so forth, so we can continue on the data that we receive from our facilities master plan that is just not life cycles or so forth, that we could really tie dollar value to a piece of equipment or a building. For one, I love to have equity among students to look at what we're spending per dollar per child in a building and so forth like that, to also make decisions where you have a school that the one that's 108 years old, we spend a lot of money on that building. So it will give us information to move forward with doing something different at that building.
With all these priorities, where does sustainability and sustainable initiatives kind of fit into your planning for schools? Alicia, do you want to start?
Sure. So within the city of Alexandria, the city actually has a green building plan, which the schools also have to adhere to. That includes just a focus on sustainability. Our last 2 schools have been built to be net zero ready, so that is currently our focus. We do a lot of geothermal systems. We have installed solar arrays within our schools, and will continue to do so. And then just making sure that we are using sustainable materials in construction has really been our focus. I do think that as we continue down the path, sustainability is not cheap. And so that is something that we have to make sure that we are adequately funding and advocating for within our budget so we can continue the trend of sustainability within our capital projects.
So I would say in Maryland, there's significant support and encouragement around sustainability. So for Baltimore City, we have the privilege of having the second and the third net zero schools that were actually built in replica of each other within the same neighborhood. So it's prime for someone to do a research and analysis to understand the impacts of having net zero schools and the performance of those net zero schools. And so we were able to do that because of resources. So we had funding through our Department of Energy that gave $2.4 million approximately to each one of those schools so that we could do those different sustainability components. So the geothermal, the solar energy panels on the roof. Then we are building 2 more schools. One is about to be completed and occupied. Also, we started off getting those schools net zero ready, and then when the funding came through, we were able to make those schools net zero. So we'll have 2 more net zero schools. I think the other benefit for Baltimore City Schools is that we also have an Office of Sustainability, which is a team of about 4 people. And so they are tracking, measuring, and monitoring, number one, to ensure that our schools are operating as net zero schools, but then also looking at other sustainability measures, incentives for us to continue to fund sustainability. And so I think that for the privilege of being in the state of Maryland and having access to those resources, but also having a team of people whose sole job is to look after sustainability opportunities and also to track and monitor it for the district is significant.
As I stated, by us starting a guaranteed energy saving program, we will audit all 13 of our buildings, find where we can make improvements on equipment and, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. On the actual structure itself, with insulation, windows, anything that can make us more efficient, net zero on a carbon footprint, solar arrays. We do have one building with solar arrays on there. Well, but I said this is a new beginning for Norristown because none of these investments were made in 30 years into the district. So it's a new day for us moving forward. Even looking at we have a swimming pool, so it might be the possibility of bringing in a micro turbine where we could take the heat from that micro turbine to heat the pool and create our own electricity in our high school. So it's not a net zero, carbon footprint, but it's still another idea having solar arrays on the roof. You're going to have a boiler heating the swimming pool up, regardless, where that heat can take care of our swimming pool and provide additional electricity to our building. At the high school there. But overall, just looking at where we can be energy efficient, adding solar and any other ways of modifying our buildings to make them insulated well, lighting. We still have some of the old lighting in our buildings, so transitioning to LEDs and so forth. A lot of low-hanging fruit. I'm pretty sure the vendors are going to identify that first, and then we'll take that finding and the fundings from there to invest into some of our larger equipment, much better HVAC equipment and so forth.
Just to follow up, Alicia, you had mentioned advocacy for sustainability. Is that at the C-suite in the school to get the funding for it? Is it to the parents, or where is that advocacy aimed at?
Well, I would say within the city of Alexandria, there is just a huge, it's very popular in the city regarding sustainability. So we actually get a lot of community advocacy for us to move forward with our sustainability projects. I would say that that helps tremendously in convincing the powers that be, whether it's the school board or the city council, to continue funding our capital projects to where we can make sure that sustainability initiative moves forward. So for us, I would say the advocacy starts within the community. A lot of partnership with the community, a lot of partnership with the city of Alexandria, and then with myself and my team, making sure that we can show the benefits of net zero, of geothermal, of our solar energy focus, and then have those conversations with the superintendent, with our CFO, and then with the school board during budget conversations so they can see that the investment is actually paying off in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And Lynette, you had a Department of Sustainability. Is that their full-time role? I know at some schools it's teachers who also share the sustainability aspect, or can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's for one of the members on the team, and then the two support, it is their full-time role. Just because when we brought on the net zero schools, the amount of additional support that was necessary, staffing support to monitor, for additional advocacy, and also to push or shift behaviors of those, the staff in the schools and different things like that. It was a full-time job. And then as we're bringing on more net zero schools, and then also as we're bringing on new schools that have HVAC systems, that have building automation, and all of the additional monitoring and tracking that we do with that, it is a full-time job. One of the other staff persons works on a lot of our utilities. I mean, the amount of savings around energy efficiency is so significant. A lot of the times they're paying for their own positions and their roles 10 times over, because the lighting projects and us being able to, a lot of our lighting projects that we're doing in schools is we're not paying for them. It's a significant reimbursement that we have across the district. And so these folks are not only just demonstrating the savings in terms of how the systems are operating, but they're also supporting in the advocacy. So at the state level, a lot of times we have legislative folks who are interested in sustainability. They're coming to Baltimore City and asking us how we run and how we operate. And I will say that, I agree with my colleagues on the table, on this panel, that it does cost money. Mm-hmm. So it's just being sustainable, and the energy efficiency that we're doing and the type of materials that we're using, there's an upfront cost to it. And so you do have to make sure that the folks or the powers that be understand the upfront costs and are willing to make that type of investment in the buildings.
So, looking ahead to the future, how do you forecast what your future needs are going to be and what projects you're going to try to secure funding for? Jeff, do you want to start?
We incorporated our facilities into our comprehensive educational plan that has to be turned into the state every 5 years. We went out and did 12 community meetings, meeting with the community to help us prioritize how we want to move forward. Also setting goals from our superintendent set goals on how we should move forward. So taking that information, taking the facilities master plan with the level of priorities, that allowed us to lay out our 10-year plan and look at funding for projects through that mapping of it. But one thing we did when we heard this from the community, if we're going to go into rehabbing all 12 of our schools, we didn't want to have someone in kindergarten go through 12 years of construction. So we looked at prioritizing our life safety stuff first, and then whatever we did was to start at the high school, middle school, and then elementary school. And then the funding, as I stated earlier, we're looking at our funding coming from the state adequacy plan that's infusing additional money into Norristown, as well as our local tax base. We don't have as large budget as my colleagues here, but we were fortunate enough to have $30 million in capital reserve now that we're going to use that to move forward, as well as look at borrowing from using bonds, public bonds, and looking at the project itself, almost an ebb and flow. So start out with a large project, pay that bond down, do some smaller ones, years out, and then once the bond is paid off or close to it, borrow more for larger projects. So that's how we looked at our 10 to 15-year plan on prioritizing projects in that nature.
Lynette?
So again, for us, it's where the resources are. So we have a annual capital budget of about $50 million, right? And that's a third of what we need for 140 buildings, 15 million square feet of spaces. So right now, for our local capital, we are targeting systemic upgrades. And then as there's additional resources, but within that, we are kind of phasing in maybe schools that are severely over capacity. And so it's a balancing act. So some of the resources are being used to build a school, but I would need 3 years worth of local capital just to build one elementary school. So, and we still have to keep up with all of our systems that are aging over the course of this time period. And so it's mainly system replacements, so system, roofs, doors, windows replacements, and then maybe an elementary school that's severely overcrowded, that's 120% utilization. Those are the ones where we're targeting our resources. If in the horizon there was additional funding coming through our state legislation, then we could add more schools onto that list. But right now, it's system replacements and those schools that are severely over capacity.
I'd say for Alexandria, over the last 6 or 7 years, we've taken a phased and strategic approach. So when I first started in 2019, we were just coming off of the back end of deferred maintenance. So a number of our buildings, I would say for probably 5 to 7 years, just because of the funding situation, were not given the attention that they needed to be given. And so we had to put a lot of effort into just getting our buildings back up to operational efficiency. From there, we really focused on our enrollment projection process. And I will say that I have an exceptional team that completes the enrollment projections. I believe this year, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been within 1%, if that, of the actual enrollment versus their projections. So that process has really allowed us to be able to plan effectively, because we're planning for our needs not just now, but in the future. I'd also say, using, again, the Facilities Condition Index process, we do it on a tri-annual basis. When we started in 2019, it was a targeted facilities condition assessment, so we were just assessing our worst buildings within the division. In 2022, I implemented a comprehensive FCI process, so we went and we did all of our buildings so we could get that true FCI score. We're actually getting ready to do our next round this summer, and those 3 things, I would say, are what help us plan strategically for the next projects that are coming down the line. Again, I think that all of this is funding dependent, so we'll see how it all plays out, and if we need to shift or reprioritize, then we have to go back to my team and we figure it out. And by figuring it out, we tackle the worst projects first in terms of anything that can impact life safety, anything that can impact just the overall quality of education that our students are receiving in that particular building. And then we'll have to phase everything else through whatever funding means we have available.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions for the panel or anything they want more information on? I want to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to get the info you're looking for. Yes.
Dr. Hart, just a question about the FCI. Is that something that your team developed? Is it something that you adopted from somewhere else? What was the process and how that was created?
Yes, so my first 7 years in K-12 was spent in Portsmouth Public Schools in southeastern Virginia, and while I was there, we had an FCI process. So that is something that, while I didn't start it in Alexandria, it is something that I helped refine that process in Alexandria. We bid that work out because I have a small but mighty team, so it's not something that we can assess in-house. And we make sure that our scope of work is extremely detailed, it's extremely in-depth. We want a full-on assessment of all of our, all of our MEP systems, of course, HVAC, exterior, interior. We also, 2 years ago, started a playground assessment process, because what we were noticing is that there was a lot of inequity in how we were replacing playgrounds. We didn't really have a process in how we were doing that. So we implemented a separate playground assessment process to just bring us full circle as it relates to all of our schools that have that particular feature. So yes.
So I just want to make, and then I'll ask you a question I want to ask you. So
FCIs or FCAs, some people call them, saying they're kind of the same thing. You just got to be careful on if you do outsourcing like that, because not all companies are created equal. Some are going to come in and all they're going to do is base it on the age of the equipment. And when that happens, you might have doors that have been there for 50 years, but they're still great. They're going to tell you that you need to replace them just based on the age. So you do have to be careful with that. So it's kind of like you do kind of get what you pay for sometimes with that. So if you put that out for an RFP or RFI or ITB or whatever, you need to be very specific in your scope and exactly what you're looking for. So that is very, very careful if you choose to go that direction. So I got a question on your funding. Do you guys have the option to do like a special local option sales tax for one thing, especially for the city of Baltimore? Because I would think that way, when people come into your city, whenever they're paying for stuff, they're actually helping pay to do your repairs or your building of your schools. Is that a possibility that you have? Because I'm from the Atlanta area, we have that ability to do that.
The realization of it is always challenging, right? So there was the bag tax, and it was supposed to go to fund schools, right? And so how that actualize is always, very challenging. And so what we do is we rely on the local capital support through the bond funding process. And if I can just add on to the facility conditions index, I think that the other point is very true about the scope, but also having your team heavily involved. So Baltimore City, we've also gone through facility conditions indexes, and it's been twice where we did the heavy lift, right? And it's very expensive for Baltimore City. We paid almost close to $1 million to do the inventory of all of our systems. But having your team directly involved, your maintenance team directly involved in the process, gets you a higher level of accuracy when that report is completed.
You said some of your questions or some of the thoughts that you had was based on the capacity of your schools. So have you thought any about possibly doing any rezoning? And I know that's a very touchy subject, or at least it is in our area. But have you considered doing that to bring down the attendance in some of your schools and share the wealth?
Undergoing a redistricting process. I think the thing with redistricting is that it shuffles the deck in terms of where students are currently enrolled, but we're also planning for future growth. So that capacity piece is still very needed within our capital improvement budget, because we know in the out years, even when the deck is reshuffled, we still have to be able to accommodate these students that we know are going to be coming into the city of Alexandria. So it's a and both for us, is that we are currently doing the redistricting process. Along with redistricting, we are also looking at our policies as it relates to redistricting, in terms of we have a capacity transfer process right now, because we know certain schools and certain boundaries, we can't accommodate all of our students within their zone schools, so we have to transfer them to another school. So all of those related policies are also currently under discussion and under review as part of the redistricting process.
I would say that in Baltimore City, yes, rezoning is a very interesting conversation. But when we had an assessment done maybe about 8 years ago, 6 to 8 years ago, it showed that rezoning was not going to fix our situation. Number one, in urban environments, children tend to be out of zone. And so within Baltimore City, I would say that maybe in any school zone, there's about anywhere between 30 to 60% of children are out of zone for a number of reasons, right? There are different special programming, like autism and special education programming that is offered at different schools, which require a student to be out of zone. We have charter schools in the urban area too. So within Baltimore City, it's a tough situation, because a lot of times rezoning, it's just going to make people upset, and it's not really going to give you the results that you need.
And for us, we're going to take advantage of rezoning our district boundary changes. Norristown Area School District is unique too. So our district is split up between 3 municipalities. At one time, they were all independent school districts, and then they came together. That's how the name came up, Norristown Area School District. But as well, it is a challenge, because one of our municipalities is not as heavy populated with children, so their school, the student population is low there, where the borough of Norristown is more of our urban area. heavily overcrowded. We would love to be able to move kids from this section, the center of the Norristown Area School District, to some of our outer schools. So we're going to take advantage of that as we go through our capital program. As I said, building a new middle school, adding on to our adding on to our high school, a ninth grade wing, and changing our elementary schools. We have one K building, and then we have K4, and then we do 5, 8, and then on to our high school. And hearing from our parents, they don't like really having the 5th graders in school with the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So we have to rezone to be able to push the 5th graders back to the K4 area, make those K5s, and possibly transition away from our kindergarten center and really have all of our schools K5, and then the 6, 8, and then on to the 9th grade wing of our high school. Our community wanted to have a 9th grade academy associated to the high school. So once you come out of the middle school, you really wouldn't transition right into high school. You would have your own academy, your own wing, to allow the youth to get accustomed and develop a little bit more maturity before they go into the high school, but still be on the same campus. So that's what's driving our redistricting.
I have a question. Schools that are aging, beyond their life, expectancy, especially in urban setting where you're going to have to become landlocked, and the cost of modification outweigh a new building, and then you can displace the school children somewhere else without redistricting. Have you guys gone through something like that?
For clarity, are you talking about renovating a building and swinging students, or?
Whatever, renovating or building a brand new instead of a very old building. You get to an option right now. You're the decision maker. If the school cost is less to build a brand new one than renovating, which happens at Prince William County at some schools, but there's an attachment from the community for the school, and you can't displace them elsewhere to do that project.
Yes. So we do have an inventory of swing space buildings that we keep in our inventory. And because we had a plan that was so aggressive, that was a 10-year plan of rebuilding 26 to 28 new schools, we kept those swing space buildings in our inventory. We're slowly moving them out of our inventory. And our process is that because Baltimore City Schools buildings are owned by the city and the school system, we're slowly turning those buildings back over to the city for whatever renovation or economic developmental use. But we did hold on to swing space schools. We still have about 3 in our inventory.
And
Sorry.
I would say in Alexandria something similar. We have a swing space protocol, but we also do what's called adaptive reuse. So I'll give you an example. With one of our elementary schools, we purchased a office building, and we renovated that for school use. So it allowed us to have a new school without the cost of fully new. And so we bought that particular building, and then a few years later, we ended up buying the sister building that's on that existing campus to act as our current swing space for 2 elementary schools that we have coming down the pike. So we really do focus on how we can utilize our existing resources to meet our needs as best as possible, because Alexandria city is definitely landlocked. It's very challenging for us to find land to build new schools, and that is something that my team works with the city, with their planning and zoning department. If there's real estate that comes available that may be a great use for a school building, then we focus on how we can make that happen to include the cost and the potential cost savings versus building new.
In Norristown, unfortunately, we sold off our swing space buildings a couple of years back, and also sold off a lot of land. So we are definitely landlocked. The one building where it's 108 years old, the good thing is the actual acreage, the footprint of the property is large enough. We're going to build behind the school. Once that school is constructed, transition the kids there, demolish the school in the front. So that's only one school that we could do that. There are some other ones where we would definitely have to look at purchasing or leasing a space to transition students to while we remodel that school. And I should say, it's one of the schools that we probably should look at. It's a 70s building where it's all pods. So it's not effective, it's not efficient. And that's one of the ones where we're challenged now with spacing. Need roughly 6 to 8 classrooms to add onto that building itself. But that one is a challenge. There is no land really for us to, build a new building in a sense.
That's our community has the pod school, and that's the one they want to get rid of as well.
So how do you make the case that the school facilities are improved? Because I see whenever there's a cut, it's like, okay, we're going to fire this many facilities people, and we're going to hire these many teachers. And it's like, don't you get the connection between the air quality, the lighting, and the facilities? How do you guys bring that in? And one of the reasons I'm asking is because I have a bunch of air quality monitors that I've scrounged up to put into schools to prove that case. And what I'm hearing from some school districts is, oh, please, we don't want those teachers. We don't want people to know. And so what I'm trying to get to is how we can be helpful in building that case. That, yeah, you can get it forward, but let's see if it's working. But, you can get a new HVAC. How well is that actually working in the building? So, and if there are any brave people that want some air quality monitors, talk to me later. But we would love to help you through that.
I'll jump in, and then I'll pass it over to Lynette. I'd say for me personally, I was able to make the case because of the condition of the buildings when I first started. There was a lot of money and a lot of time and effort that had to be put into bringing our buildings back into an acceptable condition. Not all of them, but a good majority of them. And parents during that time, they were not happy, and rightfully so. When you have, roofs that are collapsing, when you have flooding, when you have major indoor air quality problems, that impacts your child on many levels, and instructionally from a health perspective. So for me, the focus has really been, look how far we've come. Look at our buildings now, look at the types of education that can occur in our buildings because of your facilities and operations department. I would say that I'm very lucky to have a very supportive school board, a very supportive superintendent, and very supportive colleagues across the board that understand that sound teaching and instruction can occur in buildings that are falling apart. So it really hasn't ever felt, for me, like a very strong push or pull. I feel like we've been able to really work together to make the case of why both teachers and facility staffs are important. As it relates to IAQ, in 2021, I actually worked with my team to make sure that we had a fully comprehensive indoor air quality plan. We utilized the EPA Tools for Schools kit kind of as our framework for developing that written plan, to include the creation of an IAQ monitoring team. We have an IAQ coordinator within our district. We have a process for any suspected mold or suspected other, indoor air quality issues. We have, our regulated radon testing, our water quality, our Legionella testing. All of that is now on a regular basis. It's fully public, and I feel like that process for us, that transparency, has really gained us a lot of trust, and that's the good and the bad. We just had a major indoor air quality issue at one of our elementary schools, and it took us about 3 months for us to fully resolve it, but we post test results from our IAQ contractor. We make sure that, the community is fully informed about what's going on, what areas are impacted, if we need to swap students and staff to other areas of the building to make sure that, again, they're not impacted negatively, we do so. So for us, the transparency piece has really gone a long way with our indoor air quality process.
And so for me, I feel like you asked 2 questions, right? The first one is, how do we get folks to understand the importance of investing in facility infrastructure? And I feel like it's 2 different ways, right? One, a major catastrophe happens, and people say, wait a minute, we've severely underfunded facility infrastructure. For Baltimore City, it was 2018 when half of our systems went down under a cold freeze, right? And then it was the attention from everyone who says, like, what is what is the problem? And the problem was the infrastructure was not invested in as it should have been. So having that attention brought the resources to Baltimore City. And it was a significant amount of resources for us to make investments and upgrades to our HVAC systems. The other one was that when Baltimore City received the funding to do our $1.3 billion construction program, right, the state, who was also contributing, said, we want you all to contribute more. And so it kind of forced our board to actually increase our funding by about $30 million for maintenance, right? Because people talk about capital investment, they have to talk about maintenance and the general funds to support maintenance efforts within schools, which is most important. The other piece where you talk about the IEQ monitoring systems, I would say a number of organizations come to me about it. What would make school systems shift in their willingness is two things. Number one, the ability to do that installation that is not a cost impact, right? We're already working with non-operating HVAC systems. We have a lot of places where we have to put our maintenance dollars, and so putting it there, it means that somebody needs to come up with a plan where there's not a huge cost impact. And then on the other side, like, where's the funds to fix what you're monitoring and saying is broken, right? And so I'm definitely sure a lot of school systems, once the fund or whatever is broken costs $23 million, $25 million, then what's the point of bringing it up as a problem when I don't have the resources to then go and fix it?
And I just want to say to what Lynette said, I think transparency is there, right? Mm-hmm. If you know you have indoor air quality problems, you be forthcoming. These are the issues. This is the cost for it. You share that with your stakeholders. You share that with your board and so forth. And then you look at where you can transition money from a budget. It might be a one-time deal or so forth, looking at your most critical indoor air quality issues and tackle it that way. As well as, in my district, very small staff, so I have to rely on a lot of outside services. So we do bring in environmental scientists to do indoor air quality check, mold inspections. State of Pennsylvania, every year you have to be transparent about lead in your water, right? So we're mandated to do lead testing, but you can have the option of saying, I know I don't have lead, I forego the testing. So I think from our state level, from the Department of Education at the state level, putting on different mandates for us to make sure that we're transparent and being forthcoming about our issues there. But I always, hopefully I don't get in trouble saying this, I like to present to my board, here's the issue. I'm telling you the problem. This is the cost. I need your help to fix it. And if they're not capable or willing to do it, it's kind of the pressure's on them, right? And that's where the transparency comes through for the community and the students and staff too, to say, hey, this was identified by the facilities department. What are you going to do about it? And let's look at how we could transition funds around. We're going through budget process now, and sitting in cabinet, I'm, for years, just as you said, the operation team overall giving up money to put teachers and so forth. My superintendent is a big supporter. This year here, his thing was, I know we have wants for teachers, but we are going to focus on what's mandated by law in the classroom and focus the other dollars into our buildings, into our operation team and so forth. So, like I said, it's a great place, I think, where Norristown is now with transitioning to wanting to do this capital plan to upgrade all of their buildings over the next 10 years. So we're in a different place than some districts, but like I said, that was 33 years of really stagnation, and now you're moving forward.